Okay, hey everybody, it is July 1st. Guess what? That means tomorrow is our actual uh, born date of our country. It happened on the um, because they don't have like internet or phones or satellite TV back in those days. They kind of had to deal with a couple of days delay. So that's why July 4th is usually considered the Independence Day, but the actual one, it was July 2nd. And just a little bit of history there for you. And because this is Education by Ed, and today is July 1st on Sunday, 2018, I thought a little bit of fun would happen with that. Ed, why don't you take over and we can keep things going, all right?
Gotcha. Hey, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us again. We have some more information we're going to be providing to you all. The one thing before I get into quite a few other things, let me clarify, we're not doctors, lawyers, or medical providers or anything to that. We're just men and women that do research and that do come up and, bring the evidence forward. And this is the one thing about education, so that way we know our children are not going to be brought up in the misbelief of like Halloween, Christmas, these satanic holidays. And if you actually do the research, Saint Nick is called the devil, and that's even provided by the German country of Germany. And so this is the one thing that people don't do a lot of research on things. They just follow and do what they're told. And that's the saddest part that we live today, because nobody does research. And those who are doing the research, we've got those outside around us that are questioning us. And it's always like the whole point is, the proof's in the pudding. And so we're telling you and bringing you the truth, or the research that we're bringing to you, to the general public and to ourselves. And so this is the major point that it comes down to, is what is the truth? And we want to deal with facts, not administrative rules, not, the fantasy of holidays. No disrespect for those. You have a right to believe in what you choose to believe in. But the main point is that you have a right to believe what you want to believe, but at least be honest with the children. Because if honesty happens with the children, at least we know in their future they're going to have at least an idea to have a future. The saddest part today is that most kids today don't even know real history. They know a video game. They know other religious books or stuff more than they actually know about history. They don't know their family bloodline. I've talked to many teenagers, kids, and adults this week, and asking them, do you know your bloodline? Do you know your history? Do you know your circumstances of the family that when your family came to this country? Or if your family didn't come to this country, do you know the circumstances of your bloodline in this country? How many generations? How many years? If it goes back 100 years, 200 years, or 300 years, 400 years, or more. And this is the one thing that is very frustrating to a lot of us, because a lot of us, when we're talking to individuals, or men and women out there, and asking them, their points of view, what do they know? And you're finding out a lot of people don't even know a concept of what they think they know. And so it is a frustration trying to get the truth out, and most of us know this. Most of us are still doing research and all this stuff, so that way we can educate ourselves so we can bring more forward. And this is the one thing about proper education, bringing the stuff forward. And there are some of those that we really do have difference of opinions. We're not going to, skim on that one. But also, too, the other point is when the truth starts coming or the light goes off in somebody's head, it's like, oh, bingo. How does this work? How does that work? And that's the whole point about this. We want to make sure the children know the truth of these things. It's like going back, and there's several videos on the truth dealing with the Treaty of 1871, the Vatican Treaty. That goes back to, the Magna Carta, the Treaty of 1213. And I have interesting conversations with people because they want to include that in their court cases or go for that. And it's like, well, if the courts are not foreign courts, which they are, but if you're standing up on your Constitution rights, and you're standing up for your rights to be liberated, and I hate using that word, but liberated in a fashion to have concept understanding and learning abilities, then this is what needs to be passed to the children. And when you make a mistake, which I have done, like what we're doing right now is we're clarifying the issue with the one flag that we're, talking about today, what we were talking about a little bit yesterday, and dealing with the flag, the peace flag. What is it? Are we actually talking the truth? Have we been misguided in this path of history that isn't real or not? And so that is the responsibility that we have to do, because your schools ain't going to do it, because the schools can't tell the truth because they need income. They need income of a democracy. And that's the one thing that people need to realize, that a democracy is a devil's play, as some call it. And democracy is not for you, the people. It is for the corporation, dead man or dead woman entity. And so the one thing about everybody keeps going, we're a democracy. And I was listening to that earlier today with some people, and I got to the point where I literally almost hung up on a couple people today, because I kept on, shoving this democracy, trying to shove democracy down my throat. And I'm like, do you have a concept or a clue what democracy is? And then they started trying to tell me we have a right to vote. We have a right to this. And technically, that's not a democracy. That's what we're led to believe. Because in a democracy is one of those things that the corporations get to dictate to you what you're doing. And either you have a right to know what's going on or you don't. And that's where you have to stand up on these issues and make sure that the children get this. And, if you want to keep the children with an open mind and bring them up 3 points, a minimum of 3 points, I suggest. So that way they get to look at these things. They get to bring these things forward. And you want the kids to open their minds up. And this is what the whole point is getting the children to actually open their minds. And also, too, for them to read the truth. Everybody says the truth will set you free. Well, okay, we could go through with the truth that could set you free. But when it comes to a child or a young adult or a young male or female, you have to step out of the movie, watch the production. You have to see how these young people learn, how it goes through their mind, how it affects them. And when you sit back and watch this stuff, and see, the one thing is, when I was growing up, I used to be a people watcher. I used to go sit on park benches and do all this stuff, sit out there. And this way I knew what was going on right in front of my eyes. And that's the one thing that people need to realize, that you have to do this right in front of your eyes. You have to see the truth. And if you don't see the truth, how do you know the truth? Well, the other point comes down to that is faith. But what is your faith in? Who are you having faith with or in? See, this is the one thing that people are not comprehending. If you're having a deal of faith, what is faith? Faith is the man or woman or young man or young girl believing in what their faith of belief. And so we can't question those faith of belief, because that's one thing that gets us through some of these hurdles that we go through. When we watch these people where people are being assaulted, kidnapped, and held for ransom for financial and personal gain. And, bringing these truths out is what the children need. And it's like, when we look at these things, we can look back in history. It's like I grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s primarily. I had a different view of things because of the way I was brought up compared to others the way they were brought up. I didn't spend my life primarily sitting in front of the TV set. I went and worked. And that was the one thing, or I traveled with a lot of other people, and I used to sit and listen to them, but they would sit by other elders. And that is the one thing that people need to enjoy and learn, is sit back, listen to the elders. You might be surprised what you learn. Excuse me. You might be surprised what you see when you're traveling. I mean, it's like there was a movie back then, Freebie and the Bean, in California. And there was a big accident scene that I saw there on the freeway in California. And at the time, I didn't realize it was part of the movie. Well, I mean, I was just a young kid, very young at that time. Saw this thing. I was, thought it was a cool accident and all this stuff. Well, I didn't know it was a part of the Freebie and the Bean movie. That turned out years later. And this is the one thing that is knowing the difference of what is real and what is staged. Because, see, I thought it was a real accident until, I basically, when I saw the movie myself, and I went, holy mackerel, I remember those scenes. I witnessed those scenes on the side of the road in San Francisco. And it was like an eye-opening experience to me excuse me. Oh, wow, I'm dying so much tonight. But it was one of those things that when I started looking at the circumstances of that and started realizing that, the separation of fiction and reality. It always disturbs me, all these people keep Christmas going. That's fine and dandy when you think about it, but then again, you're doing that. What is it actually doing to the children around you? It's teaching them that if they don't, and I've had this experience where I went up dealing with people, and I would show up at Christmas, and the first thing out of kids' mouth, what did you get me? What did you get me? And if it wasn't what they thought, or you didn't spend a lot of money on the kids, they would turn their back on you, and they would look at you like, you're not worthy. And it's like, wait a minute. Your parents are bringing you up on a fictitious point of financial gain instead of bringing you up that we're supposed to be having a holiday here, and you're supposed to be working with each other. You're supposed to see what's going on around. Excuse me. Sorry. Bringing these things up around you. And, kids, I mean, I've had kids where I've seen where kids will sit there and say, well, that's not worth much money. Or, or you bring them something that just because they don't know the value of semi-precious stones or artwork or something like that, and they look at it and they shrug their shoulders, and it's like, well, why did you bring me that? That has no value, and it's not money. It's not something that has substantial value. But they don't even know half the stuff when it comes down to it. And it's sad because kids are not brought up to comprehend, comprehend what's going on around them on the value of things. Because value has nothing to do with materialistic things. Value comes from men and women, from their heart and soul, what they believe and what they teach. And when you get into the money circumstances of that, that's where we're challenging our children to basically that you're putting a piece of paper or materialistic value instead of family or, relatives or something to that effect. And everybody wants to do monetary. A lot of kids are brought up in monetary value today. They don't comprehend what the truth of value is. And so when I'm watching all these videos and I get all these people that send me this stuff on CPS, and it's really frustrating with a lot of these people on CPS because they do the same thing to the children. We're an advocate. We're going to go fight and defend the children. They don't give a damn. They're looking at making a name for themselves. And you and I have seen this through many people on YouTube videos, Facebook. Excuse me. I was doing fine an hour ago. Now all of a sudden, but anyhow, the value of these things that the kids are not being educated on these things. And when these parents and these people want to complain about CPS, but they refuse to learn. And I've been through that. Some of you folks have been through that when you're giving suggestions to men and women. And it's like, I always love when people say, well, I haven't had time to do that. And I'm like, I gave it to you 3 weeks ago. It's like, don't your child mean anything to you? And then they get defensive. Well, don't get defensive to me. You're the one who's defensive. You're the one that's saying that there's no value because your kid don't mean nothing. And I've had people blow off on me on that one. And some of you probably have too. And it's really disturbing because you're taking time, literally, away from your life, your time clock in your life for people at times. And a lot of us have done this. And so it's really disturbing when people ain't working with one another or wanted to learn how to protect the children or themselves in the circumstances. So the main thing on this one is learning what CPS is doing. A lot of us know that. I've put out even Oregon State manual out there for the CPS in Oregon with their job descriptions and what they are doing and what they're supposed to do. And then when you sit down and talk to some of these people that have gone through these horrendous kidnapping and assault charges by the corporation, some of these people just want to bury their heads, and they think that's acceptable. Well, that just shows me that they don't love their children. They lie to their children. They don't give a damn about their children. And I've had people hang up on the phone on me, blow off and start swearing at me when I tell them this. And it's like, you called me. You came to me. And some of you folks out there, I personally know that you've gone through this yourselves, helping people out. And these people are sitting out there going after and want to put their excuses because they don't want to learn, or their video game, or their cell phone, or their so-called friends that they think are friends who ain't real friends, because if they were friends, they would help them with their cases. They would back them up. They wouldn't get emotional in it. Let's come up with solutions and resources and how we're going to do these things. And that is the key point, too, right there, is resources on some of this stuff, because when you're fighting some of these circumstances, the resources do mean a lot. And that's the one thing that I get people all the time to tell me, well, the courts cost all this money. And I said, don't you know, are you lawful or legal? Anytime somebody calls me, the first question is usually out of my mouth to them, are you lawful and legal? I've had people that says to me, that doesn't matter. I have a right in this country. No, you do not. And this is the one thing what's going on with immigration right now. All these people say, I am a citizen. Why don't you do the investigation what a citizen is or a civilian is? See, it is when we're starting to learn different things of how to put the pieces together. Excuse me. When you're putting these pieces together, the puzzle on these things, is learning how to not only defend yourself, but to defend those around you. And a lot of people get confused, which we comprehend that. We know that in the 1980s was the biggest dumb down of the people in this country, because that was the big push dealing with, you can't have one kid smarter than the other, because if you do that, you're offending another child. These are the moronic things the Mormons and the Democrats have done. You can't have one kid smarter than the other. You have to teach them equally. Well, for those morons that do that, get your ass out in the woods and teach your kid then. Their kids don't know how to fish, got to know how to survive. They don't know the plants. They don't know what to survive, to eat the berries, what berries to eat and stuff like this. And then people want to start going after and attacking those type of things. Well, how are we supposed to survive? Let's say a national disaster does hit. How are you supposed to survive if you don't have a concept or knowledge how to do that? And that's the one thing that these men and women dealing with CPS don't have the knowledge of going in how to fight these cases. It gets frustrating to me and others that I've talked to that, when you're giving this information out to people, And they're going, oh, you're inflating my head. I can't comprehend. And I said, can you read the words? Please read the words to me. And they read the words. I said, don't you comprehend? The words say this. And then they try to interpret the words. Yeah, and this is the one thing we all been through that with ourselves and others. And it's like, why are you trying to interpret their words? You know, let's say, for example, 1404 states that very simple. If you're a citizen or national, you're an enemy to the country. And that goes under the 1917 Trading with the Enemy administrative rules. And people go, well, that doesn't seem right or whatever. I said, that's not what I'm asking you. What does the word say? If you're claiming to be a national or citizen, doesn't it state your enemy? Well, yeah, but that's not the way it's supposed to be. How do these people come up with the stuff they want to argue without learning? And I know that because I got a thick skull, and sometimes I have argued with people, and then I have to go back and say, hey, I'm a dumbass. I have to apologize. You proved something to me, and, you know, I got to bring it forward. I didn't think about it that way, or it didn't click to me at the time. But that's the one thing as a male and female, when you do get, let's say, proven wrong, go back and apologize. Make it simple. You know, we're all dumb shits in some regards until we know and have the knowledge. Then when you have the knowledge, then you start becoming smart and intelligent. Until you got the knowledge, you can't speak. And that is the frustration we are living right now today around us, especially with a lot of people with CPS. And then they want to go, no offense to religious people, God this and God that. And I go to them, where's God in this part? Well, God's going to show up somewhere, you know. And I'm like, how come you're not reading and learning? How come you're not willing to go out and protect your bloodline? Now, even if you're an immigrant to this country, you have to protect your bloodline until you become lawful. And then when you're lawful, you have to protect your bloodline even more to pass down your rights. You know, I've been watching a lot of the immigration stuff going on around the media, and everybody keeps going, well, immigrants got all these rights and stuff. And it's like, no. And the Supreme Court just recently came out again and stated immigrants don't have rights. They have privileges. And so once we're starting to educate ourselves and our children to the separation of lawful and legal and what a right is and what a privilege is. Because people go, I always love it when I talk to people on the phone. I was born in this country, and I'm American, and I want you to define what American is to me then. What's your bloodline? What's your heritage? How did that happen? And then they want to get upset at you. And I know a lot of you guys out there, and women out there, have heard this from others, and, you know, you're sitting there going, how come people are so ignorant? How come they cannot see the writings on the wall? And it is frustrating we're going through this. You know, I mean, I've got some new instruments that I'm reading, and I'm going to let you know. I did put out the 4 requests on Cape Brown. You go to new.Oregon Trackers. It's on new.Oregon Trackers on the front page. You go to the United States for America, Elected and Public Service Oversight. It's on Facebook. You can go to the Civil War 1866. It's on Facebook. You know, New Oregon Trackers on Facebook. It's on Facebook posted. Civil War, I mean, you go to Recall Cape Brown. And that is definitely on Recall Cape Brown's site, because I'm the one who started the original recall on Cape Brown. When I filed the recall on Cape Brown in Oregon Territory, I wrote it up as de jure, so that way you had to file it and certify it, and you couldn't just send it in and vote on it. You were signing an affidavit as a lawful American and producing the facts to recall her as a servant. And I argued with so many people on that, and they're trying to tell me, you don't know this and you don't know that. And I'm like, it's really disturbing, because with the original recall I filed on Cape Brown for treason, racketeering, fraud, extortion, and including her being born in Spain. She is not an American. Never has been, never will be. She's born in Spain. I've had even legislative counsel says, well, Ed, did you know that maybe her parents were born in this country? And so she was born in Spain because maybe her mother was in the military? I don't give a godtail, because the bottom line comes down, the Constitution says that you have to be born on this soil, not in another country where you have diplomatic immunity. Doesn't work that way. You have to be born on the soil to be able to claim the right. I can't be born in space and then come here and say, now I got rights. Doesn't work that way. In real reality, I wasn't born in this universe. I was born in space, if that was the case. And so it's looking at the circumstances of what we're living today and how we're going to solve these issues. And we are getting responses. We are seeing changes. You're seeing a lot of changes, and I'm watching and having enjoyment when people are still panicking over Donald Trump. You know, all these people saying he's bought and paid for by the Democrats, the New World Order. If anybody actually pays attention to Donald Trump, prove it to me. Donald Trump has filed more and more honorable paperwork than most senators and congressmen and presidents have done in previous history. He's putting things in and putting this country back to the people. He's actually putting the country back to the people if you pay attention. And that's where you have to realize that this country belongs to the native. And everybody keeps going about, well, it's the red people first. No offense. There was natives that were not just red people here. And that's been proven in history. You know, we all live here in this country, this territory, or the states. And remember, a state is considered a country. So what is your liability? What is your responsibility? What are you going to do to protect yourself, your children? And that's the one reason why we're putting out these FOIA requests. And if anybody wants to run that with Kate Brown and run it with your own governor in your area, your state, your territory, use it. You know, at least let us know you're using it. We appreciate that. So that way we can pass the consideration on to others that were involved. And that's the one thing, is that the stuff that we put out, we're not out there, you know, charging people, making a claim to it. We're putting it out there going, use it, pass it on, be smart, be responsible and liable for your actions. And that's the one thing that I watch. A lot of people want to sit there and don't want to be responsible for their actions. Well, if you don't want to be responsible, okay, go back to the corporation. You can't have it both ways. Either you're in the corporation or you're not in the corporation. Or you filed in the corporation to own you, and you have to sit there and take the liability of those things. Learn what it means. Comprehend what those real means of liability are. So it's like when I put this letter out this weekend, I sent it to the state attorney general, the House and Senate. Oh, I'm not bashful. I even sent out to even Lars Larson, talk show host. You know, that's one thing. Me and Lars have had some conflicts over the years because, you know, he's a capitalist. He believes that everybody has to pay the privilege for air. Even though he's gone out and stated on his talk show that, you know, you don't have to pay for air, it's carbon tax. Well, of course, I know. I argued with him on his show on that 5-6 years ago. And it's like, the one thing is that when it comes down to it, we shouldn't be arguing. We're not supposed to be here for personal gain. You know, I watch these other TV commercials that says that, you know, you're here on this planet to learn. We already know this. We don't need these stupid talk show hosts out there trying to sell their products to us, trying to sit there and come across in a simplistic point of view to us. You know, because, I mean, they're really disturbing. I mean, I watch some of these YouTube videos and these little commercials come up, and you look at these commercials and you're wondering, you know, how much that, you know, I still would like to find out what it costs for YouTube commercials. But these guys are putting these commercials on, and they're coming out and telling everybody that, Basically, you need to learn from Tony Robinson and all these other people that made all these millions of dollars. Well, some of these people made millions of dollars because people were not educated, so they had to grasp at something. So they grasped at something. They never grasped the truth, maybe in their life, maybe around them. They're going by what somebody else says. And that is the one thing that people need to realize on these things. When it comes down to the children, you have to educate the children. I've talked to people and I've watched people go, well, you shouldn't discipline your child, you should go to jail. Yeah, shit, we all were spanked when we grew up. It didn't hurt us. It just woke us up to things that we shouldn't do, grabbing a fireplace stove or, the stove with a hot pan on it. Things like that. Those stuff are real. And so we live this stuff, but we can't lose reality that's around us in these circumstances that we're dealing with. And that's the main point, educating the children on this. And when you send, and I deal with a lot of people on Facebook too, and getting this stuff out. And by the way, we do like to thank Facebook, because without Facebook, a lot of us wouldn't have a lot of connections, and everybody wants to go off on Facebook. They give my privacy away and stuff. Well, then file on your privacy. Quit being a dumbass. They don't have a right to give your privacy away unless you own it. And it's in the Facebook contract. Why don't you read it sometime? See, people don't read a lot of things that goes on. They're willing to interpret things around for their own personal gain, as we have learned in learning. And when people are doing this, it comes out the cost for all of us involved. And Facebook ain't all that bad. I hate to tell a lot of people, because if Facebook was all that bad, 90% of us wouldn't be in contact today because of Facebook. Free phone, email that they have. When Facebook put the phone on, man, how many people got rid of cell phones and they used just Facebook phone? No cost. What has that done? It's like the Postal Service. When you think about the Postal Service, how much they've lost in revenue over the years because they're going by, everybody's going by Facebook or email. So the Postal Service lost 60% of their business just right off the bat for that. And these people don't take an account for these things. They don't look at how the circumstances are. And yes, some of these things were already prepaid and they've already been deducted, and that's a reality. So you have to do the research on these things. And that's like the 4 requests I put in for Kate Brown. I had a whole bunch of questions for her, and I'm doing that to the police chief here and the sheriff. I want them to prove their points. I want them to prove that they have legal or lawful authority, especially the sheriff. Because I got a 2012 case from Connecticut that says that the sheriff has no legal authority. He's part of the corporation when that was formed after the Civil War. And so we know the sheriff was technically supposed to be in place, and if you haven't caught that one in, I please advise you to watch the movie Blazing Saddles. And watch that movie, because it tells you the year that Congress allowed the sheriff to be what they call legal. And that's the one thing, too, when you put your affidavits and instruments together. Ask them when the sheriff became legal. Not lawfully. Yesterday, Friday, dealing with the 14th Amendment. And they're trying to tell me the 14th Amendment, this, that, and the other thing. We know it wasn't ratified. We know it was passed administratively. We know the 13th Amendment was ratified, titles of nobility. That's why when people say, Ed, you could be called an expert stuff. No, I look at it that's possibly a title of nobility. And comprehending those things like that, because that could be considered, in my mind, a title of nobility, because you're claiming a title that you're an expert. Okay, so you're claiming a title. That means a liability issue that you could be sued for. if that makes sense. I don't want to sit there and put a title of nobility. That's like a lot of these people put, I'm a public figure out there. Public figure is a title of nobility. And so when we do this to ourselves and we're putting these titles on ourselves, you know, we're supposed to be free men and women. And definitely, I did put up on new.org and trackers dealing with Social Security that you could opt out of Social Security, period, 100% out. And if you ever fill a tax form out on a W-4 form, there's an exempt box there, small in the right corner. They put it small for a reason. But you get exempt out of this stuff. You're exempt from the taxes. You're exempt from their services. So that way you're not their slave. You know, we had a guest last night, Nene, that was bringing up some stuff with that last night. And, you know, a lot of natives are finally waking up and going, I'm not your citizen. Basically, I'm not your slave. We don't want your carts. We don't want this. Now, we have settlements that the natives have had over the last 100 years from Supreme Court and even military judiciaries. And so that's the one point when you get that, you're out of their system. But the one thing, as a wise man said to me, always get it certified. Ask for certification, because once you get it certified, what are they going to do? Argue with their own certification? When it comes from the Secretary of State or even a certification from a courtroom. And when you win a court case, always get that court case certified, mandatory. And people say, what does that mean? I won. I don't have to get it certified. Well, if you got it certified, that way they can't try to sneak you and try to do double identity on you. And that's the one thing that people are not paying attention to. That I've seen people that won cases and all of a sudden a few years later had a case brought up against them, the same case. I do know a gentleman that is dealing with that right now. And it's like, why didn't you get it certified? He's working on it now, but it's like when he won the case, he should have got it certified. And then he's telling me, you know, I did think about that at the time, but I didn't do it. And I'm like, well, if you thought about it, why didn't you think about it and do it? If you thought about it, you knew the truth was there. Because when you have those thoughts that go through your mind, you know, you can call it, you know, God is an intuition, or the Great Spirit is an intuition, or the Creator is an intuition, or whatever your religious belief is an intuition. But when you get a gut feeling, or you get a feeling that you know you should do something, do it. It's like some people get a feeling when they're driving down the road, and they're saying, well, something tells me to make a right here. Don't keep going straight. And then you realize that there was a massive car wreck. You know, in that time that if you would have been there, you might have been in that wreck. But your intuition or your thoughts or whatever was there that brought you out of that circumstances to go in a different direction brought you a new point of view. And I've had that happen to me in my past. You know, where I was sitting there going down the highway and I decided to take another street. And then I found out on the news there was a massive wreck, and I'm like, holy mackerel, if I looked at the timing, I would have been in it. And some of you have gone through that in yourself in your life, too. So when you have these feelings and intuitions or these thoughts that you need to change the direction or do this or do that, do it. When you're writing an instrument and you're getting suggestion or some would say, or advice from somebody, and you feel that advice is not correct, double check with other people before you make a decision that could harm you. And that's the whole point that we want to do here is educate you guys, educate ourselves, so when people do send us information, I go through this information, I double check a lot of it to prove one way or the other. And if it's proven, it's time to do it. And this is the one thing that when you're running a court case, get it certified, get it stamped. And the one thing to realize that warrants cannot be robo-stamped. That's federal law. They have to be signed or autographed with wet ink. A lot of people get arrested, hauled off in jail for even traffic citation, and next thing you know, you get a so-called warrant thrown in your jail cell here's the warrant for you. And I've been there myself. It's like, well, what do you mean a warrant for me now? Where was the warrant where I was kidnapped and arrested or kidnapped and held for hostage for your personal financial gain? And let me tell you, if you end up in jail, don't argue with these idiots, because that's what makes them flare, because they love having people to be abused. They get a kick out of it. You got to realize that a lot of these public servants, like I preach all the time, they don't care about you. They don't love you. And so when you stand up for your rights, that is your rights. And if you're an immigrant, that's your privileges. If you're an immigrant that is paying all your taxes and following the administrative rules of the structure 1404, national and native, or national and citizens, when you're paying taxes, that ensures your security, so long as you're not breaking what one would call law. And so when you're filing your paperwork as an immigrant, you can quote those things. You pay your taxes. You have the evidence. You're following administrative rules. And most people don't get that. They want to argue these little things instead of comprehending how we're living on this soil for immigrants and lawful bloodline Americans versus the terrorists that come over and are making personal financial gain over a corporation. I don't believe any immigrant has a right to a job in my country, to tell you the truth, because the bottom line comes out with that. They're supposed to come to our country and be able to support themselves. If I went to a foreign country, I'm supposed to support myself technically. I'm not supposed to be on welfare, food stamps, or anything like that. I'm not supposed to be in their administrative system where they're running checks on me and everything. You want to be out of the system, foreign or domestic. And it's standing up for these rights that gives you the rights for your children, for your grandchildren. And that is the one thing, too. It's like when we were talking about last night, and we're bringing up now, too, we want to check the civilian, not the civilian, but the peace flag, see if it's real or not. And so these are the things that, we took it down off the sites right now until we confirm it. And then we're going to go after and try to get somebody to put in the certification letter, certify it. So this way we're not brought up into a conflict of interest. That's the one thing you don't want to be in, a conflict of interest. And most people don't realize when you go to court, and I always love this with court. I went through this 2 days ago with another gentleman. He was going through court, and he's arguing with the judge about rights. And it's like, didn't you ever file the paperwork? You had the paperwork 2 months ago. How come you never filed in court? Well, I wanted to get in court and tell the judge. Big mistake. Hearsay evidence can't be admissible. And he's going, well, that's not true. I said it in court. It has to be. I said, did you record it? Well, no. You think they recorded? Did you get the recording? Did you actually listen to the recording that the judge agreed to those things? See, that's the one thing that people need to realize, that you're elected and public servants when you're doing this stuff. Agree. When it's in paper, filed with the clerk, they can't argue that. That's certified file. And if you have a clerk that stamps your paperwork, and it might not be certified, and I've put the law on that, if they stamp it and it was put into court, that's certification too. That's federal law. See, they come up with a lot of interesting ways to confuse us so that way we're not being liable for our actions. Or they're not liable for their actions. So it depends on both sides of the coin you're playing on that one. And the one thing, when you go to court, you always got to be honorable. Oh, that's the one thing that gets to me. I've been dealing with one case off and on for the last 3 years here. And now the individual decided, well, after 2 years, that now they want to stand up and go after it. Well, we already went through this 3 years ago, and if you would have done it 2 years ago, the individual would have had their children back. But then they play in these games, and that's the frustration. They go, oh, God's going to save me. God's going to do that. And like I said to the individual, it's been 2 years. Where's your God? You know, you had the paperwork. How come you never filed it when it was there? And, well, the attorney told me not to do it. Oh, so you have a public pretender that's dictating to you how to do the case so that way they make their money and they walk away from their case with their federal debt notes in their pocket, and you walk away with nothing and you still don't have your children. I mean, we got a lot of frustration, confusion going on. We've got a lot of people out there that are out there telling people what, why, and how to do things. It always concerns me when people are out there going, hey, you know, I'm going to charge you $500 for this or that. And I always love it where you got these people that says, well, I need an attorney. I need an attorney. Well, what are you calling me for? Go find your attorney. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a clerk. I'm not a notary. And we do clarify that on this talk show, too, that, you know, we're not one of these corporation members. And when people try to put you in that, it really disturbs me because sometimes I've got a flag that comes up going, are they trying to set me up? Or are they trying to set somebody else up that I know? See, those things do come up, those flags. And that's the one thing that people have to pay attention to, those flags. When your gut tells you something, you have to pay attention to that. And if you don't pay attention to that, we all lose. You're not the only one who loses on that. Everybody else around you loses on that when you're not standing up for yourself. It makes it more difficult for others who are trying to win their court cases because all these court cases get numbered and then they get billed. And that's the one thing, too, is that if you are kidnapped and held for ransom, that's misuse of public funds. That's a federal crime. And it's true. It's misuse of public funds. So, and because remember, the judge, the clerk, the public pretender, everybody of them are getting paid under the de facto dollars. That's supposed to be public funding. So they're misusing public funding, and that's public fraud. And if an attorney didn't win your court case for you, you go after them on it because that's public fraud too. Because attorneys have a contract. And that's what I do tell people, read the contracts. Ask the bar if you're going to go that direction. You know, I watch people that go to the bar and they lose their case and then they go after and attack everybody else because they didn't want to pay attention to the suggestions of others. You know, we're not advocates here. I don't claim to be an advocate because an advocate becomes a liability responsibility. We got a lot of advocates out there on the circumstances, you know, even on Facebook and other channels out there. And they're doing this stuff without having a comprehension what they're doing. They don't comprehend administrative rules. They don't comprehend the bar structure. And so they want to go out there and be an advocate when most of these people, I would say 95 to 99% of them, don't have any concept of law. You know, they're supposed to be out there protecting the children. And I talked to them quite a few times, and I've had many of them hang up on the phone on me. You know, and I'll question them. Here's the law. What's this? What's that? How did you handle it? And I've had them hang up on me, and it's like, well, that's not the way it works. And it's like, it is the way it works if you go into court and if you didn't file your paperwork correctly. And the one thing, too, is like on all of my paperwork and a lot of the associates that we deal with, we always put a clause in that paperwork that we can amend and change that at any time if we find an error in it. So we have to personally do it. We have to certify it. We have to autograph it. The courts can't change the paperwork. And so when you do your affidavits and your paperwork correctly and you put it so that way they can't change it, yeah, the judge is going to tell you, screw you, I can do anything you want. But the point is that when eventually, if you do get into a court of appeals or a higher court on the circumstances, and if you finally do get an honorable man or woman in the circumstances, you'll see that things change. Things are changing right now today across the country, and that has to do with Trump. I'll tell you that right now. Well, I'm not a voter. I'm not into the republic or democracy system in any fashion. I don't vote because if I vote, then that makes me a responsible party to the senators, the House of Representatives for the financial debts that I create. And when you're a voter, you're agreeing to the terms on the voting. Most people don't read the terms on a voting contract because when you do become a voter, you're signing a contract. Except for the state of Oregon, and I know a few other states have done it. In the state of Oregon, the state will put you as a registered voter mandatorily computerized in their computer when you turn 18. So if you know kids that are going through that, hey, tell them to reject it, rescind the contract. Because once you get in that point, because Oregon is trying to put everybody in the trap here. They want to own your land. They want to own your soil. They want to own your bloodline. These people here in Oregon don't give a rat's tail about you. We're going to see if this one gentleman who's running for governor will do it. Not only that, he is a doctor. Cute. And so when he's a doctor, he knows the birth certificate bonds and stuff. And that's the one thing that people could be writing this senator, representative, and ask him, what is he going to do with the birth certificate bonds? How is he going to use it to pay off the debt? See, these questions need to be answered from these public servants and brought out to these public servants. That's like with the FOIA request I'm going to be having out tomorrow, dealing with the police departments. We'll make sure that that's publicly out there. So you better keep an eye on the Facebook sites and, new.Oregon trackers. Use it and ask your police chiefs the questions. And the sheriff, we're going to be asking him the questions dealing with military on his stars that he has on his uniforms. What do those mean? So we got questions to ask these people, and we want responses for them. If they don't respond, we'll make it public that they're, committing treason. They won't answer a question, so that means they shouldn't be in their position because they're not responding legally back to the people. And they have an obligation to respond to us. And that's the one thing that people need to realize, that these elected and public employees have obligations. And I always get frustrated when people say, the government did this, the government did that. Well, if you actually read the Constitution, the first branch of government, as even Judge Scalia stated, more than one court case he did, you, the people, the bloodline of this country, are the government. These men and women ain't government that is in our country. We don't live in England. We don't live in Greece. We don't live in Spain. We are so privileged on this soil in the 48 states that people have no concept of what the Constitution does. You'll have people say, well, the Constitution don't apply to you. Fine, if it don't apply to me, then what are you doing here? Now, you'll find out most of those people that are telling you the Constitution don't apply for you are making a living off of it. And that's the saddest point where the reality we're living today on these circumstances. So I want to get thoughts to people going, think about these things. When you're going to court, think about it. When you got these questions going to court, dealing with what you're dealing with, think about these things. Think about the effect and cause that it happens not only with you, but others around you. You got to remember, the liability issue is on you. You can't always play or act in ignorance and stupid. Not everybody's a blonde, so you can't claim it. And when people want to go around claiming these terms, that's what gets us in trouble. And we don't want to keep these things going where people are in trouble. We don't want this. We want to make sure that elected and public servants are doing the servitude. We have a man that is out there doing totally different things than the general public ever been done in history. Totally has never been done in history in some regards. The way he's speaking, what he's doing. When you start realizing what Donald Trump has done, because wait a minute, Donald Trump lives in New York City. New York City is in New York, New York. New York, New York is not part of the United States. It's part of the Vatican. Washington, D.C. I mean, people got to learn the history of this country. Learn who, what, why is involved. And once you know who, what, why is involved, then we know that we have security. But that's the main point, is standing up to know what you are involved in. And once you know what you're involved in and you know what you're securing, that's going to protect you, your children, your bloodline. And once you do that, that's the future we have. And most people don't see that point. They don't comprehend those differences. And once you start comprehending what a right is compared to a privilege, we start winning. We start looking at these things. We start proceeding where we're winning. And so that's the one thing that is separating ourselves from the confusion that we keep getting talked into. I watch people all the time that will go off on tangents on Facebook. And it's like you ask them a question, and then people get upset because they don't want to sit there and deal with the truth, even their own truth. And so when it comes down to it, who is to protect who? Your job is to protect your bloodline first. I watch a lot of people that go out and do these tangents and, want to go fight the world, and they think they're going to save the world. Well, I'll tell you how stupid I was. In the 80s, I thought I was going to go into law enforcement and do all these wonderful things until I realized that I was going down the wrong path. And I realized that law enforcement was not the truth. It wasn't what I believed it was. It wasn't what I thought it was. It wasn't the structure of my knowledge of to stand up for freedom. And that's the one thing that people don't comprehend, what freedom is. What is freedom? Freedom means that you're not a burden on others. Freedom means that you're not liable for others. And when you go to court today, remember, the courts want you to be liable for somebody else. Because if you're liable for somebody else, the court's going to write it off on, what is that called, taxes. And if you do end up paying, a citation or a fine, any type of taxes, file a 10-9 form on them. Because they have to record the taxes. You want to make sure that they're recording that income. Because if they don't report that income, then that's a liability issue. And if you do it through the IRS correctly, the IRS has actually closed down courtrooms across this country. Literally closed them down. And people think, well, that doesn't affect us. Yes, it does. I can't remember the city, but one city 2 years ago was completely closed down. Literally, the city council and everything was abolished because of not paying the court taxes. And if you go dealing with the IRS, you'll find out that the IRS hasn't paid taxes, and that's even been proven through the Department of IRS in Washington, D.C. And that's the one thing that people got to realize and wake up to these things. We got all these people out there whining and crying about these poor deported people. Hey, if I come into your house and I'm telling you how to live in your house, yeah, right, tell me how to leave your house. So that's what gets to me when all these people are out there whining about the deportation and all this. I didn't come in your house and take your remote and sit in your chair and eat your food. See, people got to start realizing when you got, another 15 million people coming in, where is the food? Where is the food? And that's the one thing that we don't realize, that we don't have the real food resources that we think we do. 60% of the food right now today in all the grocery stores across the 48 states is fake. Most of your rice that comes into this country I think it was proven that was 33 or 39% was plastic. And you can type in plastic rice. There's hundreds of videos up there where you got people who cooked rice, they're rolling it up in balls and bouncing it around their kitchens. And it is true. This is what's really happening around us. So when everybody goes, oh, well, we got more room in this country, how are you going to eat? And then you got to look at the other point of when you put up buildings and all these other circumstances of structures, where is the deer, the elk, the salmon, the other food going to go when you butcher the trees down? You take away the food resources. You take away the development of nature. Because before any food resources really develop, it takes 100 years for a forest to even start coming back. And that's already been proven in history, and that's been proven by ODF and W and a lot of these universities and colleges. But then they go, well, we need to cut the trees down, so we need more wood. Why are we sitting there and selling Japan wood, and they're taking it out and sinking in China, or they're taking it out and sinking it in their bays? Because China brought up a good point 7 or 8 years ago, because I'm on the coast out here, and there was an argument that was going on shipping timber from the West Coast to China and Japan, and their response was, hey, we know one day you're going to have to not cut trees down anymore, so we're going to have to sell it back to you. And so they're going to sell us back rotten wood, rotten bug-infested wood. And then we already dealt with that here on the West Coast with Canada, bringing in all the bugs that came in. If you look at the trees and you wonder why they're dying around you on the West Coast, like the beetle, I can't remember the name of the beetle, but it came from Canada down here. And that's the one thing that when you're sitting there destroying your food resources, and then when people tell me they love and care for their children, I question that. I really do question that. Because you're sitting there and going, well, my life is more important than my bloodline. You know, how do you solve the issues? Well, that's the point that we're working on. And we're supposed to be standing together as neighbors in this country. Not that we've been so divided by these idiots from foreign corporations and got us arguing over Democrat and Republican structure. I mean, you know, that's the one thing that always frustrates me. Everybody wants to argue, but nobody wants a solution to the problem. And there's a lot of good men and women out there that have real solutions to these problems. Are they allowed to get it out there? Well, you got everybody else wants to argue the point, because most people, when they argue a point, they're out there for their own personal financial gain. They're out for a paycheck, or the stocks of a corporation, stocks of their bill, whatever. And so this is the one thing that we are working on these things, so that way with the comprehension of you knowing your lawful rights versus legal rights. And I've argued with many people on that. You know, Ed, what is a lawful American? Well, going back to 1770, that was part of the foundation, and the first Congress brought it up. And we put that, I believe that's on the website. We brought these things up to people. And even in a 1952 Administration Act that was done on immigration, again, revised even with Muslims. And everybody goes, well, these Muslims are peaceful people. Step out of your dream and fantasy. Go read their authority, what their Bible says, what their religion says. I mean, you know, Mexico just passed it now that you could have relations with a 12-year-old girl. Sweden says that you can marry a 12-year-old girl now today. So parents could sell their children to the highest bidder. And people don't think it's real. It is real, folks. We are physically living this hell today. And everybody goes, well, that goes against the Bible. That goes against common sense. I mean, there are people that believe in their religion, and I support that. But also, too, I believe in common sense. That's the one thing that, a child at that age shouldn't be having a relationship. But, that's not my decision to tell that child or that parent. But I'm entitled to my opinion on it, and that's what you're entitled to, your opinion. And I want to hit one quick point on abortions before I turn this thing over to others. That, everybody keeps going, well, we don't want abortions. Well, the Constitution gives a woman the rights to her body, equal rights to her body. And when you have a parasite that's growing in your body, the woman has the right to decide what that's going to do to her. And if a man chose the wrong woman, he chose the wrong woman. He can't sit there and dictate to the woman that you're going to be forced to do this, you're going to be forced to do that, because this book says that you have to do it. See, that's called responsibility. Either you know the responsibility that you took or you got into, or you don't. And it is responsibility. How many people really know about responsibility? Very few people technically do. And the reason why I say that, because a lot of people who are on, let's say, food stamps, welfare, that type of stuff, immigrants that come over here, that's not responsible. You're not being responsible planning for your children's future, planning for your way to survive. So it comes down to responsibility, personal liability for one's actions. And so once we start stepping forward on this and start opening up these things, opening up people's minds so that way they quit fighting one another over somebody's belief. When you got people yelling and screaming at the street corner against one another, abortion. I just watched a video yesterday that was going on Friday on abortion again. And it's like, who gives these people the right to tell somebody else how to dictate in their home, how to live in their home? Yes, it might sit there and deplete the population because that's exactly what abortion does. But then again, man and woman have to be reliable. And then they always say, and I always love it when people say, or Christians would say, no offense to the Christians, tell the woman to close her legs. Well, you go tell that to a dog. You go tell that to an elk and deer. Let's be realistic. First of all, people, you are an animal. You go by animal instincts first. And once you start accepting that responsibility, then that way we can start working on the other. But you have to accept that personal responsibility that under Title 7, 136, Section 7, we're animals. We're no different than any other animal on the face of the earth when it comes down to it. Just because the Great Spirit gave us a brain and we think that we're utilizing it, but we're not utilizing the whole brain. We're not utilizing, common sense most of the time. And so when the children don't get this knowledge of how to be responsible, and then everybody wants to argue and, go after and attack somebody for their religious belief, that's crazy. Because I don't believe in what some people believe in their religion, but I have to respect and honor their belief. I have to believe that they have common sense or that they have intelligence to make the right decisions. And if they don't make the right decision, who gives me the right to go dictate to them on their decision of what they did wrong? What gives you the right to dictate to somebody on their decision of what they did wrong? So that's the saddest part that we're living, because everybody wants to tell somebody else how to live, but they don't want somebody to tell them how to live. They want to get so abrasive, swearing or whatever else. You can't tell me how to live. But then again, people are willing to tell somebody else how to live, and everybody's doing that right now today, one way or another. So it is very, very frustrating that we're all going through this turmoil, that we're all living these things. And so I want to get into a couple things before I open up the floor here. But I wanted to make sure that people started comprehending that when you are realizing the courts that you're going into, realize the court you're going into. always file the number one thing. I don't care if it's a traffic ticket, a brainwash ticket, a fart ticket, whatever. File for jurisdiction. You want to know the jurisdiction. What gives that authority to that judge? You want it in writing. And the other point is you want to get it certified. And when you're taking a case to the Superior Court, Supreme Court, you want to make sure that the public servant has a notarized statement of employment. That's called his oath of office. And so that is your responsibility. I've had several people that I walked through them on that. We dealt with that. And, then they get upset because it didn't work the way they wanted. And I always love it because I've talked this many times before, where people want to argue with a judge. You go in, you don't argue, you make your peace, you say your piece, and get out. Remember, this is not family time when you go to court. And like I said, all public servants, officers, officials, congressmen, politicians, judges, attorneys, law enforcement officers, states, and their various agencies, that they have to register with the 1938 Foreign Agent Registration Act. That's 22 USC 286 ETSEQ 263-A. And you want to pull this stuff up, and every time you write an instrument, you put that in. I suggest, it's your instruments, your thoughts, but I suggest that you put that in. And that's per 8 USC 11A2. You want to put those things in your affidavit because if something comes back, you don't create a loophole. People say, well, we're creating a loophole. You're not creating a loophole. You're creating it so that way you have protection. So anyhow, we're going to go ahead and open up the floor.
All participants are unmuted.
May I?
Yep, floor is yours.
Trump, people don't know if to trust him or not trust him, to love or hate him. But reading Judge Anna's recent post, and he shut down this counterfeit money, the actual plates. Apparently these big Jews are giving them the actual treasury plates, paper and ink. You cannot even distinguish what's fake or real. They did the same thing back in World War II under Morgenthau. They sent paper and ink to Russia, and but Trump supposedly he shut it down. They supposedly had some bombing strikes to shut that all down. You brought up this legal thing. That's the corporate term, and we got lawful, which is what we understand. Whenever you register something or you record something, those are two different. It's the same distinction. If you register something, like your driver register your driver's license or your voter registration or whatever, that's in the jurisdiction of the C. It's corporate. But whenever you record something, record your claim prospect, that's the jurisdiction of the land. So we need to record our stuff in the land recorder's office because that's the land jurisdiction. I noticed you said something. You had to file your file for jurisdiction. When you file, you ask them under what gives you the jurisdiction. How do you phrase that? You say, what is it? Did I admit to being your all capital letters, or how do
no? You're doing capital letters. That is foreign. That's the law of the sea. And the one thing is to clarify, Ann Von Ritz is not a judge, and I've already had it proven by the state of Alaska.
Common law judge, not a corporate, not a.
Okay, well, all right, but that's where Bruce Sassett ended up in jail because Bruce studied under her.
No, he is actually. She told him not to do what he was done. They had a big falling out over that.
Well, she did that after he got arrested because she went after him and Mike Hamilton and everybody in a letter that I have that she wrote that she put out after they were arrested.
That's a big blow up. I don't really know all the little details of that, and but
no problem.
They were charged with paper terrorism because they were going after these judges and putting liens on them. Now, you could argue. That's a very technical little deal there. But I mean, the guy got like 37 years. The guy got 37 years for paper. That's just outrageous. For what he thought he was doing something right. And anyway, but one more thing though is like we're trying to reestablish the common law courts. We had one in Texas. We had the Republic of Texas, the 1834 Republic of Texas, which was an actual nation. We got treaties and all that. Now they had a court that just shut down in 2008. It was run by this pastor in Richardson County. We're trying to reestablish that, and we're being tutored by the Michigan General Assembly just exactly how to reset it up, and do everything according to with their approval. And basically, he said you don't need nobody's approval. You don't need you just basically silence is consent. You say, well, we're setting up this company area, and we're setting up this assembly, and we're going to have our own court judicial system, and file that. And if nobody disapproves, actually it's like 100 days, I believe is what it is, and the local in country it's like 10 days, I believe it is. If you don't rebut that, it's law. It's silence is consent. And that's how they're doing it. But we're trying to set up this. It was there in 2008. We're just trying to bring it back to life. I reading through the protocols of the court, and basically says you don't want any conviction prisoners because they're basically career criminals, and they're just looking for an out. So they're not the kind of people you want to do business with. We don't acknowledge statutory law, criminal. We don't different type of things, criminal or civil. We don't do that. And we're not getting too specific. You didn't get that specific, but I assume there's going to go more or less with claims and go that route there without getting into the statutes and codes. But anyway, this is going to go nationwide. They're trying. The Michigan General Assembly is pushing this court assembly and court system nationwide, and it's not rebutted. It's all legal. It's just the way our founding country was set up. We filed for a company, and as doing business, and if nobody rebuts that, then we're going to just take off and go.
Because unrebutted affidavit stands as law in commercial code.
Yeah, that's how mechanics lien works. And you notify the person that is the wrongdoer, and give them being honorable and let them know, hey, you're going to straighten this out here. And if they don't do it, then you take that. You go in there and you file a claim against them in a court. And if the judge will notice, well, you get the right amount of time you elapsed and everything's good, okay, set a court date, boom, and you take them to court, but
what court are you going to take them to? That's the point that I was bringing up. You have to make sure you get a certified oath from a judge from any court you're going that he has a oath to the Constitution, not to their corporation.
That's getting pretty picky, though, don't you think?
No, it's not picky at all.
Just kidding. Yeah, I know what you mean. it's because they're not really supposed to be doing business in here as a corporation. They're supposed to have an oath to the Constitution, not to the corporate charter. Yeah.
Right.
But they got all the guns though, Ed.
I'm sorry.
They got all the guns. There ain't much we can do about it.
So, and I'll send you a copy if I haven't sent you what I sent to the governor. And then I'll get you a copy of what I'm sending out to the police department and sheriffs. And like I said, anybody could use that because more and more people we get sending this information out and asking these questions of their position, what their authority is, questioning what their corporation identity is. I mean, this thing had this paperwork that I'm putting out. From it was put together by a couple people that were really thoughtful and thinking, and I'm able to provide it and bring it out to people. And like I said, I did send mine to the Department of Justice and everything this last weekend.
Right. It's like if they don't have jurisdiction and they go on with it, they can be charged for treason for that.
Right, and we know that, but now we got the information. Now we can start doing it. Because now when we put this affidavit or this information and asking them what their qualifications are, we want responses. They don't get a response, and we file back with them because by law they're supposed to give a response back to us.
Right.
And so that's what we need to start doing is flooding these things across the country so that way the police departments and everything else start standing up. And there's supposed to be another police department in the Midwest, which I heard rumor, but I haven't been able to prove it yet. But another police department in a big city is literally supposed to be shutting down, including their local court.
Sweet. Yeah. It's like I was listening to a guy. He teaches us in class, and he basically it's role playing. It's like playing tennis.
Right.
He plays the judge, and you come in as your defendant, and he says, "Hey, you." With a cigarette in your ear, if you turn around and say, "Who, me?" He's got you under his jurisdiction because you acknowledge.
That's right.
It's just so many little dirty tricks they play on you. It's amazing.
Oh yeah. That's why I don't like responding to when I'm out in public too. I've had people that would yell my name when I'm walking down the street, and I won't respond. I don't know who they are.
Yeah, you don't even have to acknowledge the name. Just say, "Hey, you," and you just acknowledge that.
That's right.
Enough. It's you've got to practice. There's just no way you can go in there and keep your nerves still. When you got so much animosity being focused at you, they will do anything to intimidate you, to strike fear into you, so they can get their jurisdiction over you, and it's all over.
Well, and that's one of the tricks that the police department uses when you're walking down the street.
Intimidation, 100%. Yep.
Well, they even yell, "Hey, you," and you turn around or you say, "What?" You respond to that deal. You're right underneath the police department's authority right then on the spot. And people don't realize it.
Very dirty trick.
Yeah, I hung around the industry once, so I learned a few of their tricks.
Yeah, there's a lot of things things like they can go as long as they can squeeze into a little, through a hole in a fence or something like that. A cop told me this. And as long as I can squeeze into a spot, I can go anywhere. Oh, really? Damn.
Yeah, and they can on commercial property. Absolutely, they can. And that's the one thing that people do not comprehend on commercial property, how police have so much way that they can manipulate through the administrative rules on that.
All right. I was just learning from Carl Lawrence. He basically, now he's saying he got this from Bill Thornton. And you don't say a word. You don't say a word in that court, not a word. If somebody says, how do you plead? You say, "Can I have a pen and paper, please?" And you answer in writing, and say, and you put on there, say, "I'm sorry, but it wouldn't be beneficial to me, to do, but you don't answer. You don't say a word. because they're going to try to entrap you. And Bill Thornton, he said he got that from Bill Thornton. Everything's in paper.
Well, Bill Thornton learned that the hard way in court more than one time. That's why he's speaking out now. I haven't talked to Bill in a while, but I do keep track of him in some of his emails. And Bill Thornton learned a lot going through court and being tricked back through it and walked back through different things. And so, yeah, he's bringing out a lot more information now than he did a couple years ago.
Yep. He's a great teacher. He's very knowledgeable. Carl Brooks is very knowledgeable. And you know, I totally agree with this one teacher. You don't learn this, you know, in just a few lessons. You need to go to a class and just basically you role play. You have to play through this and just practice and practice and practice. You know, it makes perfect sense to me. It just does.
Well, have you ever watched Carl Miller's tapes?
Yeah, I know Carl Miller. He's very intelligent. He taught me a lot about you just Marbury versus Madison. You can take the whole law library and that would equal Marbury versus Madison. Anything repugnant to the Constitution is null and void. 1803, I believe.
Yep. No, he brings out a lot with that stuff. And like I said, we've got a lot of men and women out there that have a lot of good knowledge, but the main point is that working that out with each other so that way we can make sure that we're not walking into somebody's misguidance. I mean, because like I said, with Bill Thornton, go ahead.
Walking into an ambush. That's what it is. They got you all set up when you come in there. They're gunning for you.
Well, they have to, because that's how they make their income. And that's the one thing that people got to realize, that they're making an income. And so if you can prove that the judge committed fraud, you have to file that he misused public funding. And I can't think of the U.S. code off the top of my head, but there is codes on that if they do misplace and misuse public funding, they can actually physically go to jail for that. And there are judges. There is one case that's going on right now that I'm following until I see more out of it, but a judge is on the hot seat for that. And they just brought up one of the charges in his case last week for misusing public funding, because he charged for him being on the bench to the, what they call his taxpayers. So he charged for being on the bench, and when the case should have never even been brought into court. So that's misuse of public funding. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's another one. There's another one. Is like whenever one of these DAs they'll say, well, if you'll plead to this here, we'll just forget about this other stuff. Well, if you can get that on paper or find some way to record that, that's extortion. That is no doubt about it. And also, if that's you go out and if you go out and rat on some people over here, and we'll let you off, on your offense. That's more extortion. What they're doing is just so, just
bluntly right in front of our face.
Right, so evil, right in front. Yeah, and we're like sheep. We go in there. Say, how do you plead? Bah. Say, do you want an attorney? Bah. Just go right to slaughter.
Well, and if anybody knows, if you hire an attorney, you give up your Constitution rights right off the bat.
That's right.
You have no rights at all when you hire an attorney. You give your rights over to that attorney, and he can put you in jail, do whatever he wants to you.
That's right, power of attorney. And not only that, it also demonstrates you're incompetent. You can't do it yourself. And it also gives them the court jurisdiction.
Correct. So, all right, let's see if anybody else would like to throw something in.
All right, bye.
I heard a gurgle. Go. The floor is open.
Hey, Mr. Ed.
Go ahead.
Let me give you some advice on jurisdiction. If I put your name on a piece of paper and file it in that court, that judge now has jurisdiction. This was disclosed to me many, many moons ago. All right? It automatically has jurisdiction. The trick is, there's a trick to that, though. There's an Achilles heel there. And we're not going to discuss this right now on this call. But I've already told you some of it.
Right.
All right? Now, there's where they're getting you. All right? When you go up to the judge in his courtrooms and he goes, do you understand the charges brought against you? He's not giving you that old adage, do you stand under me? No. He's asking you, are you present? Okay, it's a maximum law to answer for the charges. All right? Some lady I know out in Texas said, no, you know this lady. And the judge looked over at somebody and said, put a warrant out for arrest, she's not present. Which was an eye-opener to her because she thought she was going to get away with it. It didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But there is remedy here on this. Okay?
Okay.
And in time we're going to get into it.
Okay. We'll hit that one a little later. And so that's the one thing is so we know what's going on. We're comprehending what these courts are doing, how they're doing it, how they're putting people under their jurisdiction. And that is the one thing. And I always recommend, too, if you end up going to these kangaroo court systems, try to pack the courtroom with as many people as you can, too, as witnesses. You want witnesses for what they're doing, and that is your responsibility. And it is hard when there's not a lot of people around that are willing to go out and stand up amongst one another. And that is the saddest part we've got today that's going on, because not everybody is willing to stand up side by side or stand amongst one another or be with one another, proving these fraud and corruption, because most people are terrified when it comes to those things, and that's the saddest part. Now, a lot of people live in the shadows or in fear. You know, it's like it says, the shadow always knows. So if the shadow knows, you have to know about the shadow. Just a thought for people to think about. So, anybody else got something they'd like to add? Nobody else has got anything to add? So, but that's the one thing, too. When you put your affidavits together, quote the law, administrative rules, and those things. That's their administrative rules, and, you know, ask them, are they abiding by their administrative rules? Now, you can't be afraid to ask questions. And that's the one thing when a judge says to you, do you know the charges brought against you? No. No, I mean, unless you've done personal and property damage. If you've done personal and property damage, yes, you're liable. If you haven't done that, you never admit to nothing. And so, anyhow, so if nobody else has got something to add, I guess we'll get ready to call it here. But let's get into, you know, the one thing is always challenge the jurisdiction of the judge. And if you don't know that, foreign agent, all judges are lawfully required to have an oath. That is 28USC or USC 302. It's the oath of office, and ask it for it in writing and certified. And if you can't do that, you always go to the county clerk, because you could always get a copy of their oath on record. And when you get a copy of their oath, ask the clerk at the clerk's office to certify that oath. And then once you got that oath certified, now you have further evidence if they took the oath to the Constitution or if they took the oath to the corporation. And it's very simple the way those things are written on the administrative rules. It really is. You know, it really is. And so there's a lot of simple things out there to bring out there, but always never be afraid to ask a question. And if you don't comprehend, go ahead.
In one of the videos I was watching, like I said, if they turn around and say that you need to file Freedom Information Act, is that something that's required, or is that just them being real horses behind?
They're horses behind, but then you want to file the act, and I'll give you what I'm sending out to the governor and the police chiefs and stuff. And so we're going to see how this pertains, because I just put out the first one this weekend, and I got the other ones going out tomorrow. But yes, the Freedom Information Act, and when you do that, be a little bit specific of what you're asking for, but then, you know, I'm not sure exactly what I'm looking for, so I need this file. You know, and they're going to go try to get you narrowed down so that way they can go through the file and handpick what they want to give you. And you don't want them to pick it. You want to be able to yourself to research it, read it, and go through it. Because they will decide what you're allowed to get if you do their paperwork. You know, I'm doing another Freedom Information Act against another public agency coming up tomorrow or the next day. And, you know, they were like, well, we want to know what you're specifically looking for, Ed. And I said, well, I don't know what I'm looking for until I find it. Then they're like, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, I don't know. I'm looking. I mean, I got to go through the file and see what applies. I can't give you a derivative answer on something I'm not there yet. And that scares the hell out of them, too.
But isn't that supposed to be public knowledge? I mean, if they followed for their oath of office?
Supposed to be, but has it been working that you know of?
No.
So that's the point that I'm putting out, the one I did to the governor, and then, like I said, I'm putting one out to the police department and sheriff tomorrow. And so we'll have those posted up next week on new.Oregon trackers. But that's the one thing that we want to make sure that they have to be able to prove their statements. You know, they're supposed to be worthy. Go ahead.
How do you know if they've, you know, fudged it by moving the date back or whatever on that instrument?
Well, if they've done that and you can see the mark on the paper, you absolutely know. But if there's no mark on the paper and they've done it smoothly, that is the conflict. And I've seen that one happen before, where they basically created a new docket and backdated it. And you can always tell that by how fresh the ink is. If that makes sense.
Oh, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the one thing. Go ahead.
No, I was saying thank you. I yield.
Okay. Well, anybody else got anything else they would like to add? Nobody's got anything to add? Okay, well, if nobody's got anything to add, we'll call it an evening. We'll look at next week. I've got research to do.
All participants are muted.
When I get this other paperwork done, I'll make sure it gets out to everybody so that way they can pass it around, look at it, explore it. And if you want to use it, I encourage people to use it on these Freedom Information Act that we're putting out there and the requests that we're putting out there. Because what we're putting out is differently than what most people are putting out there, definitely. And so that's the main point of always educating ourselves along the road here so we know what we're doing not only for ourselves but for those around us. So, but with that, seeing that nobody else has got anything else they would like to add, we'll call it an evening. So I'll say May the Great Spirit bless you, Mother Earth feed you, and the Creator look over all of you.
Thank you, Ed. It was educational. But it is currently July 1st, 2018. It is a Sunday. And be safe if you're going to deal with the fireworks. Please don't get burned. Do not start any forest fires or anything like that. Be responsible. But remember, you take liability for all your own actions. We do not take liability for any of your actions. Thank you very much, and have a good night.